And now we move on to the next part of this session where we're going to do a panel discussion. And before we dive right into that panel discussion, a couple of words. So what we did notice in the keynotes, they were extremely informative, but something that came out and something that we could not ignore was that despite the very brisk pace that the speakers kept, there was so much that was left uncovered because there is so much there is that can be done in this particular area. Well, I get the sense that the communications community has been a little slow in taking AI ML up as a viable tool for building networks, for applying it to other applications, and then there's a reason for that. I will talk about it sometime during this panel. But without taking too much time away from our esteemed panelists, I would like to start with Vinod. Vinod is an expert in the area of AI ML, and he brings to us a flavor wherein he hasn't had a very large exposure to applying it to communications, and since that could sometimes be an extremely unbiased opinion of what AI ML can do as a tool for communication. So I would like to bring you on first. Vinod, can you please share with us a bit about AI ML and what you think it can and cannot do for communication?
Thank you, Professor Brajesh. I hope you all can see me and hear me well.
Yes, please continue.
All right, okay. So good evening to all of you. It's great to have all of you here, and it's a fantastic conversation that we had so far from both the keynote speakers. So thank you very much for that too. So coming to machine learning and AI, right? So the first thing that I would say is this is not a new technology, or it's not a new domain, right? So this has been around for decades now, right? But even though it's an old domain and technology, over the last decade or so, maybe over the last 8 or 10 years, we have seen a huge amount of changes in the industry, right? If you look at the adoption, I don't have to be talking about adoption because we see it all around. The very fact that we have a session here and we are talking in length and breadth, and if you look at the examples that Professor Dr. Paul and Dr. Bhattacharya mentioned, right? These are all practical examples that they brought in. These are real-time use cases that we can relate to, right? So that shows us that analytics, machine learning, AI, it's all, it is in the middle of us, right? It's in the practical, it is solving practical problems for us. One thing that I would say is earlier, adoption was a huge challenge. But now, if you look at open source, right, it is bringing up a lot of technologies on the front that, in my perspective, has improved adoption to a large extent, in my point of view, right? So now, if you look at it is out of the labs. Earlier, it used to be a lot of research used to happen in labs, but that's not the case anymore, right? Now, enterprises are adopting. But the key challenges, in my point of view, in my interaction with customers and different enterprises, is that they are able to build models nowadays. They are able to build applications using machine learning models. But the key challenge that they are facing is in operationalizing those machine learning models. What I mean by operationalizing is deploying those models, which is giving actually good business outcomes, right? Those models, deploying those in production. That is number one. And number two is ability to sustain the business outcomes. Right. What I mean by that is over a period in time, say 3 months or 6 months or 1 year, the business outcomes should sustain, or rather, it should be refined further and it should go up one level, right? But that's the huge challenge that enterprises are facing. So if I put that in 4 dimensions, right, the number one would be the ability to identify problems that ML and AI can solve. Number one. Number two would be acquiring and preparing the right data, because without that right data, it is all almost useless, right? So acquiring the data, identifying where the data is, acquiring the data, and preparing the data. Why I'm saying acquiring specifically is because when it comes to enterprises, right, with the right data security and governance, getting data to the labs and the engineering systems, right, it's not that easy. It's a challenge. The third one is building models, and the fourth one is about the ability to deploy those tested models in production systems. So that's where a huge challenge is happening. Again, like I mentioned, right, the explosion in open source world has given a huge jumpstart to the industry, but in terms of the ability to operationalize it successfully remains a huge challenge in the industry, in my point of view. And if I give a couple of examples, right, during training of a model, probably the accuracy is pretty good, but in production over a period in time, we see that the accuracy comes down. It could be because of drift in data. It could be because of the environment that keeps changing, inability actually to monitor, to do continuous evaluation, continuous learning loop, which includes retraining and redeployment, and a very robust and integrated DevOps pipeline, right? That's also extremely important. Another one would be like in a lot of enterprises, right? Very skilled data scientists would eventually end up babysitting their models in production, because unless those experts are getting into the production systems, those models are not performing well. And that's not good, right? You don't want your expert data scientists to be babysitting models in production. And the third one that I would say would be about scalability. And now cloud is a big phenomenon. So the ability to move between on-prem systems and cloud systems seamlessly, right? So these are all operational challenges that the enterprises are facing, in my point of view.
Thank you so much. That's an interesting perspective. I will come back to you shortly, but before that, let's move to a claim diametrically opposite view. Subhash, he claims that he's been using the tool and he's not really an expert in that tool. It's something that I beg to disagree, but that's for another panel discussion. So right now, Subhash, given that you're a practitioner of this art and you've been applying it, you claim blindly, to a lot of network and communication problems, could you please give your perspective to the problem?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Brajesh Lal, for giving me the stage. So I was very intently listening to the keynote sessions as well as what Vinod just said, and pretty much a lot has been covered, or a very wide canvas has been applied for. So as I mentioned in my initial conversation with you, I look into AI as a knife, and if it is given to a surgeon, the surgeon can heal a particular condition, or it can be used to kill somebody, right? Or it can be used for cutting vegetable, right? So the key point is AI as a technique which has become a commodity with very different features. How do we really apply into the network and the associated aspects? So I'll pick up two specific points. The one point Dr. Harvey had already discussed into fair amount details. How do I really have the autonomy in the network itself? So if I look into human as an autonomous system, what are the kind of services human can give? Human can do a courier delivery, human can become an expert cook, or human can become an expert into the machine learning as a discipline. Now, this domain aspect is a very, very long drawn process. So when I talk about the telecom as a domain, application of that is essentially addressing what you look at as the autonomic network, something that Dr. Harvey talked about. And then if I take my note, he talked about the seamless blending of machine learning, orchestrating them across to solve a particular domain problem. Now, if I go into one level up to bring in the cross-domain perspective, if I have to now bring in the 5G where the industry applications are coming in, it becomes extremely important that this domain-specific aspect, the network is able to handle. So we are talking about network slicing precisely for that reason. Using the same physical network, I am logically segmenting it into multi-part and doing the efficient resource management in such a fashion that I can cater to that particular need. An IoT system may require a latency sensitive, real-time, very few byte of data, whereas a massive machine type communication may require a very high bandwidth application. And the way you handle the packets in these two cases are dramatically different, right? So you have to apply all of them and manage the quality of experience. It becomes a cross-layer problem. So within the network itself, if you look at, like, go from the radio access network, the most complicated part and the heart of the network, to upper layer at the MAC, the RLC, PDCP, RRC, and then application layer protocol like HTTP that is carrying your application workload. How do you really make sure they are seamlessly blended together to bring in the quality of experience? So I'll take a very simple example. The perceptual evaluation of speech quality, perceptual evaluation of video quality, the standard has evolved in ITU for over 20 years. And if you really look at that, if I have to use an AI technique to detect that in real time without putting an active probe in the user device, it could be an example of user experience. Now you look into the design problem of a ultra low latency mission critical communication. Let us say that you are doing a remote control of a mission critical machine, a nuclear plant, for example. And if you do any problem there, it can cause an explosion. Now, if we have to have an autonomous system to govern that without any foolproof mechanism, you essentially need to make sure that the model has been trained in such a fashion and it is able to apply that, and cutting across the complexity of the machine interface as well as the network aspect. So I think that is where I would say that if we can address that aspect to handle the quality of experience, blending the network characteristic, I think we will have a great state to be in. So how do you really apply and train that? And then I think Vinod talked about a lot of operational challenges. All of that will apply into a cross-layer manner, is my perspective.
Thank you so much, Subhash. I will come back to you shortly. But before that, there's one more perspective that I need. And before I invite Dheeraj in, let me just put it in context. Like I said, the communications community had been a little slow in adapting to the change using AI ML as a tool. And there's a reason for that. And towards the end of your discussion, Dheeraj, I'd request you to tell us a bit about what the communication community can contribute to the AI ML community in terms of processing information, because this community has been in its own way processing a lot. So while you talk about using AI ML in communications, please also talk about what it can give back to the AI ML. Over to you, Dheeraj.
Thank you, Professor Lal. Very wonderful insights by all the previous speakers. So one point that I would like to bring up in this discussion before I move to what Professor Lal mentioned is some of the challenges that I, as an AI researcher, have been coming across at different levels. So the challenges are mostly in terms of these data acquisition that Vinod had already mentioned. So I'll not focus much about that. Then defining the right problem, there's privacy issues, etc. A lot of them. But one aspect that's been bothering me quite a bit is about the domain knowledge that is required while working on problems in this area. So I was teaching this machine learning course at IITH, and there was a student who had come to me and he said, "Sir, I know everything about deep learning, but I haven't done anything, or I do not know anything about machine learning." So I was really taken aback. So, but that's really when it hit me that deep learning is actually being looked as a tool rather than it's just become like a software tool for most people out there rather than knowing why they're applying it. And I don't even really have to mention about the communications or the networks part. Looks like most people do not even know, at least the people who are using it. And the funny part is the way this field started, applications of machine learning and AI for wireless communications, the initial works have always been something like this. So people used well-known results from other domains, and they applied it to some problems in wireless communications. And of course, it grabbed a lot of attention. And I'm not saying it's wrong. I mean, it was good. At least it gave confidence to people that something can be done, but it should not continue for a long time. I mean, because wireless communications by itself is a much different domain when compared to other machine learning applications. I mean, other domains where machine learning is used, especially it has a rich theory, right? It has a rich established theory for the last 60, 70 years. You should use it. For instance, you need to know where to apply it. For instance, there are problems that you know that the maximum likelihood solution is always the optimal and you know you can solve it. Then what is the point of using machine learning for such a problem? So you need to have this domain knowledge. You need to know the right, what are the potential solutions that have been tried using all of this theory. I mean, it's not like wireless did not work for 60 years. It worked with all this theory. And we are still communicating, and we are already into 5G without machine learning. So things are working. So first find out what's working, how is it working, and then do I really need machine learning on top of it? Of course, there are problems where machine learning is helping. For instance, there are problems like non-trivial problems, like one of the problems that Subhash mentioned, like cross-layer optimization in networks, QoE, power control in a network setting, scheduling problems. All these have been solved suboptimally in the past, but of course, use machine learning there. And I'm sorry.
Please continue. I think Dheeraj, it was by mistake. Please continue.
Yeah, sure. And similarly, when you come to 5G, it's better to know. So knowingly or unknowingly, 5G was designed to be quite flexible. I mean, so now when you want to apply it to 5G, you need to know which parts of 5G you can optimize using machine learning for the control plane or the user plane. So maybe because a control plane, you always want it to be robust. So don't use machine learning there. Maybe use it for the user plane data. And so one thing I really want to drive home is that domain knowledge is still very, very important. Deep learning is a tool, but please use it judiciously for the right set of problems. So Professor Lal, if I can comment on what COM theory communications can help for this machine learning world. So I would like to highlight two main points. One, communications has been helping to understand why deep learning is working. Actually, there are some recent works that have come out in the cross domain of communications and machine learning. This theory is called information bottleneck. So people are trying to understand why deep neural networks are working. So this hasn't happened over the last 10, 12 years, although there has been an unprecedented success in the image world and the natural language processing world. But someone recently found out this connection, very nice connection. So you have a deep neural network or some deep network. There's an input, there's an output, and in between there's a black box. So there's this input, it's being transformed to something inside this black box, such that this intermediate state still has the information, everything about the input, but just enough, not everything. It's like a compressed version. And this intermediate stage should be enough to tell everything about the output. So I have an X input, there's a intermediate stage I, and there's a output label Y. So I'm trying to compress X to I and reconstruct from I to Y. So it's like a source coding problem that has been studied from 1960s in wireless communications and information theory world. And people have really found out, at least for some cases, how the information is propagating from the input layers to these intermediate layers and how it's propagating to the output layers. So this is some remarkable success that has recently happened, and a lot of work is still going on. This is one, at least that way, communications theory, I would say, has helping the machine learning world move forward. And another direction is more like an applications direction, where, for instance, there's a lot of buzz and talk about edge analytics and making things work at the edge. For instance, I mean, there's a lot of data available at the edge, so let's do machine learning at the edge. But these models are pushed onto the cloud, and the cloud does, it's like a genie who is looking at all the models and telling us, the edge devices again, what to do. Now, these edge devices and the cloud, they're talking over the air. You need communications there. So how do I send these models? You need to compress this information. How do I compress this information in a lossless manner? Then there's a wireless channel. which of these edge devices should I schedule? How many edge devices should I take these learned models from? This is again a scheduling problem that is coming into this picture. So communications is actually helping. For instance, the term is federated learning in the machine learning world. I don't think federated learning would be a success without communications.
Yeah, thank you so much. Those are very, very interesting insights. As a matter of fact, Dheeraj, in our lab here at IIT Delhi, we are using information bottlenecking not just for visualization, but also for pruning.
Oh, right.
So there is this interest in pruning because there's so much of complexity. The number of weights that you have to work with are really, really large. There's work on pruning. So information bottlenecking is playing a role there. So for the audience, so what Dheeraj talked about is not something that will happen. It is something that is happening already. So thank you so much for that, Dheeraj. And before I come back to the second round and open it up to the audience, I would request Kalpesh to say a few words about something very interesting. While I was discussing with what we can talk about in this panel, he talked about this term. Instead of network orchestration, why don't we talk about network choreography? So I'll hand it over to Kalpesh and talk a little more about it himself.
Yeah, thanks, Professor Lal. I hope I'm audible. I'll start a little bit with the point that there was a time when network is the computer where we started, and scenario is that cloud is the computer. And now if I say that network cloud is computer or the intelligent network cloud is the computer, that's where we are coming in with the AI and ML. And all throughout, I have been looking at the word that we have an orchestration of all the components of the network and the automation and management and whatnot. But in the whole process, what is happening that you need one extra entity. You need really one mediator. You need one manager who will really do this. And that is really a bottleneck in my view. In fact, I would like to go to a level that my each network component, each network service, each of the network is an independent entity. And I would like to have a choreography amongst them. Because when I say choreography, there is a one intelligent process which has already happened. And each and every component of my player are knowing that what they are supposed to do, number one. They also know that what is to be done when somebody is responding in a particular manner. They also know that which all PCs are supposed to do what. And as a result, I would like to say that it is an intelligent entity. And that intelligence has to come through my AI and ML. And that's what is my base or very brief connect on this. But for that, we really need to look at my network or the series of the network or the component of the network. And I will really require to go back to decouple each and everything. I don't want to use the network as a composite entity, or I don't want to see the network as a black box entity, if I can use that word. So my each layer of network can I segregate. Each layer of my network can get connected. I can slice it out as it is available into the 5G. And my multiple network slicing can be done intelligently, can be connected, and I can offer a very different layer. I can offer a very, very future network, which is really in demand, I would like to say. Why I'm saying it is in demand? Because there are two terms which are really very interesting. One is the internet of money, and second is the internet of the behavior. Now I'll just pick up the word internet of money because money is involved, and that's how the whatever network is today is not going to be sufficient. I need much more intelligent network. And why I'm saying this, just to supplement data that by 2025, 10% of the GDP is going to be capitalized into the cryptocurrency. And with this data, that should be in the range of 150 to 200 trillion dollar. That's what is the estimated number I remember. So I need to have an intelligent network. My each piece is going to be independent, intelligent, and for that I would really like to say that. The whole thought process for my future network is really need to change. For that, I will connect to the cloud interoperability, where we are at a stage that some project has been kicked off and slightly we have started, I would like to say, in terms of the action. So when we are talking about cloud interoperability, one more component is coming, or I am putting it in a level that we are trying to network a series of the cloud to come into a very one comprehensive single cloud for my end consumer. And that's where I would really like to bring in the intelligence component, and the network is coming in picture. And so with this thought process, the ultimate point which is to be driven is, can we create something where we can define that what are the network pieces I can create independently which are into a composite manner which is being seen. That is number one. And how I can put my AI ML into that piece in such a way that something which is required really by the Internet of Money can be given. So with this brief, I'll release to Professor Lal, and any question on this are welcome.
Thank you so much, Kalpesh. Now, thank you for prompting me. I was about to say the same, that we are through little more than half of the panel now. So I would request the participants, the audience, to start asking questions. You can put your questions with the name of the intended panel member in the question section. And if you have a comment, you could put that in the chat. We will try to look at them and answer some of them offline. And the others we probably might take up if they are of interest to people more than just the person who asked the question. So now, before I move into the second round of questions, a couple of things I want to talk about. One thing that we must keep in mind about AI ML in the area of communications is that there is a lot more that can be done. And like Dheeraj also pointed out, there's a lot more that will come back to you when you start using a lot more AI ML in comm, because the comm community will also give back to you in a certain way. So with that in mind, what I've noticed is that it seems to be trickling from the higher layers towards the 5 layers. So it all started in the application layer, and it seems to be trickling towards the physical layer. And when it reaches the physical layer, I think inputs from the physical layer will now start moving up towards the application layer. And I hope a lot of that happens, because that's personally of interest to me. If I find time towards the end of this panel, there are 5 areas on which we are trying to reach out to the entire research community in India to participate in AI ML for future networks. But that is only if we find the time. So one of those areas is quality of experience, and Subhash has he delved into quality of experience very briefly. I'd want to go back to him and request him to talk a bit more about quality of experience and its implications.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Lal. So I know the time is short and I can go on, so please contain me, interrupt me if I do not stop. So quality of experience is not, I would say, pure science, right? It is a combination of perception and the real performance. And there are 3 actors into this, as I see it. The end user device, the network as a transport layer to connect the server who is rendering the service to the end user, and the sentiment or the mood of the consumer itself. If I am in an angry state, the network connection is pretty good, but because my device was perhaps occupied with something else, ran out of memory, and then it is giving a poor experience, I will get angry at that point in time. So though I know that network is giving a lot of throughput, So the first question is back to the point that Dr. Harvey had made. And then Dr. Bhattacharya also talked about some of them being very ambiguous, specifically in the language context. The quality of experience also is very subjective. The same experience for me and you are not going to be the same. So first of all, how do I model the quality of experience? And that is why the domain aspect that Saidhiraj also was talking about, it is very important that you apply that filter of the quality of experience in the context of that particular domain. And can you really have a quantitative measure from the subjective one? For your analytics to work and analytical model to be applicable and quantify and say amongst these three players plus the mood of that particular user, how do you really create this model? So and if I have to parameterize this, collect the right set of data, as I would agree with many people here mentioned that it is not necessary that I have to apply the AI model everywhere. The telecom network has a lot of deterministic aspect. A simple algorithm perhaps will work a lot better in those cases, and I wouldn't even try applying an AI algorithm there. But there are cases that there are issues related to data privacy. So for example, my quality of experience could be measured by putting an agent in my handset, right? Just to determine exactly the point that are there certain heartbeat mechanism to check, is my device performant at this point in time? Then I go and check, is the network performant to give me the kind of bandwidth and latency I require for this particular service to run adequately from the end user perspective? And then server can detect, is my load under control for me to render the quality of experience that I have signed up into the SLA level. So one good part is the 5G network has brought in a lot of architectural components, be it the microservices or the network exposure function or network data analytics function, that allow you to consume it as a publish subscribe service to get the right set of data in real time. And a lot of discussion happened on the continuous learning, continuous DevOps model. For this to be done, the question is, how do I make it non-ambiguous? Is there a precise definition that we can do, right? So bringing in that intent into a declarative mode to actual action, de-anonymizing it is a big task. And one key aspect I would say is the data collection and annotating them automatically is a large task. Today, for me to train a particular telecom engineer reasonable level, it takes me 1 year before he or she is productive. Now, can an AI model help me do a textbooks reading to create an AI agent equivalent of a telecom expert who could do the same level of performance? Would be probably the Turing test to say that I have been able to apply the AI model to create a automated agent who can really do the job that a human can do. Of course, I am not wanting to try that, but just to give the perspective.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. So that's interesting. Subhash, that will bring me to a question that I wanted to ask Vinod, but I'll come to that a little later because there's a question from the audience, and that's for all the panel members. But I'll request Dheeraj to take it. So Vishnu says, AI is opined as a pillar of 6G and future networks. So what, in the panel's opinion, on how AI would be applied in 6G, which layer, what cost, and what? So you get the idea, the drift, right? So what do you think is going to happen there, Dheeraj?
Sure.
Please go ahead.
Thanks for the question. So definitely, I think AI would be one of the components that would drive the innovations for 6G technology, but certainly not the only one. And concerned to which layer, I don't think it can be restricted to one layer, especially from the answer that Subhash has just mentioned, right? And what Professor Lal has mentioned, things trickle down from the top to bottom, and of course from bottom to top. So for instance, one of the success stories that I know in this area is a startup from a couple of my friends in Stanford, Uhana. which was bought by VMware. So what these guys did was they developed this data analytics function for cellular networks. They operate at different layers. They operated at the multimedia application layer, and they operated also at the physical layer as well as at the MAC layer. So what they ensured was they looked at different user experiences like the QoE that Subhash mentioned, the call drop rates, or whatever metrics they could for different kinds of users. And overall, they help to improve using reinforcement learning or neural networks, whatever it could be. They overall improved the network's performance, and they actually tried and tested it in Israel and Australia. And they were luckily bought by a company called Israel. And the only reason they succeeded was they had algorithms which were working at different layers. And at different layers, the algorithms were working at different granularity of times. For instance, at a multimedia application layer, you want things to be working maybe more at a seconds level or something like that. But a physical layer, you come down, like for instance, in the 5G, you want things to work at a millisecond level. You need algorithms at all the layers, and all of them should combine, work in harness. I mean, really, you cannot say that it's one layer which will work and make the cut.
Thank you, Dheeraj. That's an interesting perspective. Now, before I go to the next question, I would try to. So I will use the analogy that Subhash gave. I really like that, the knife and the chef. So a sharp knife being used by a chef who is extremely trained. Now, here there's talk of the chef himself also being done by AI ML. So there's talk of auto AI, there's talk of auto ML. So Vinod, I want to come back to you. This is the question that I wanted to ask you. What is happening in the space of auto ML, auto AI for other applications? And do you think it will make an impact in the comm sector as well?
So initially brought it up, right? In one of his slides, he touched upon the Google use case where he showed the auto ML, auto AI case. And I think all the enterprises are now coming up with this. So if you look at the Gartner's hype chart probably a couple of years back, it was there. And now it is no more there because there is adoption. Now, if you ask me about the maturity of it, I wouldn't say it is mature enough for enterprises to put that directly in production, but there is a lot of research happening and there is a lot of investment happening on that field, right? So that way, yes, there is a lot of attention. Now, in my perspective, right, so there are a few areas where it's giving a jump start. So one is when in a specific problem statement, you want to get a jump start on your data, right? You want to analyze your data. You want to discover the early patterns in the data, and you want to see what sort of data parameters are missing in your data, right? Before you apply that into machine learning, I think Auto ML can really help you in that. That is one particular area that I would highlight. Another one is you are experimenting and you want to see. You really want to get a jump start and see like how can I narrow it down? Because if you look at the volume of algorithms now available, right, and especially since now a lot of technologies are providing beautiful wrappers around the different algorithms. So the ability to adopt those algorithms are much easier compared to the past. So you probably you're spoiled with choices, right? In certain cases at least, so to speak. So in such a scenario, how can you get a jump start, right? So that is another second scenario where I would say Auto ML or Auto AI can be a good tool where it can do this discovery of data, applying some analytics on data and figuring out the gaps in there and doing feature engineering, right? For instance, like identifying the different feature parameters and then experiment with probably a dozen algorithms or half a dozen algorithms. And then if it can give a leaderboard based approach to the experiment, right? Wherein it can list like these are the top 3 or 4 algorithms that we see, which is as a better candidate comparatively for your data set and your problem statement, right? That could give the team a good jump start. And also it can do like you have a lot of knobs, right? You can do you have a lot of parameters and you can do a lot of tuning of your hyperparameters, for instance, right? So the tool can help you do a little bit of that and give you a perspective on how the results are moving when you tune certain parameters, right? So that kind of insights can give a perspective to the team on what direction to take, right? I would say the technology and the landscape is at that level of maturity rather than taking it directly and consuming that in a production perspective. I don't think it's there yet. If it can facilitate a lot of customization opportunities on top of these recommendations, I think that's a good win-win scenario.
Right. Thank you for that input. So now we'll take another couple of questions. Now, there's Bignaraj Panigrahi who's sent in a couple of questions. We'll take the first one. And Subhash, I'd want you to handle this. This is something that you had talked about when we had our discussion on this panel. In case of unavailability of data from real networks, can a synthetically generated data be used to test the modules that are used as a real network scenario? So Subhash, over to you.
Yeah, absolutely. The answer is yes. The question is, do we precisely know what data I need to fuel my model? As long as we have that clarity, it can be done, but it could be challenging as well. So I will just explaining some challenge. Let's say that I would like to collect a data sample cutting across the application layer and the network layer. Now let us say quality of experience fundamentally would depend on, from network perspective, 3 parameters. What is the throughput that I am getting? What is the latency? And what is the application's bandwidth requirement and the latency requirement? Now these are the 3 very simple parameters. Now it may look very simple from application perspective when abstracted, but if you go across the physical layer to MAC layer to RLC and eventually the IP packet it delivers, at every layer level there are multiple set of parameters: the hybrid ARQ setting, the channel condition setting, the channel bandwidth setup, the backhaul conditions. All of that are going to attribute in addition to the dynamic condition as to how many users are attached to that at that point in time, and if you have enabled the QoS or not. Now, based on this dynamism, you want to collect a sample and then level the quality of experience at that instance in time. So first of all, if you want to go the layer level optimization, you need to know what data is there at the physical layer, including all the channel condition parameters at the physical layer. At the MAC layer, the scheduling algorithm that is being used, the parameter used associated with that, and the system construction aspect for you to get a sense of what is happening at the MAC layer, and then this goes on. So the point is, you would need to have a correlated data collection and level it to say that for this particular mean opinion score, for example, perceptual evaluation of video quality you are doing, mean opinion score of 4 versus 2, what has been the associated physical layer parameter, MAC layer, and then RLC. I will stop at this 3 layer. And then eventually what has been the reflection of that in terms of latency, jitter, and the throughput at the IP packet level. So if you can correlate them together, I can say I have a curated correlated data set that corresponds to one particular MOS level and corresponding network data. Capturing that in real time and then synchronizing them is not a matter of joke. It is really complicated. I have done this experiment in the lab, so I can tell you that we had to do multiple steps to make it happen, but it is possible.
Thank you so much.
So, now, Professor Lal, I would like to put a comment on that question actually.
Sure, please.
So one of the key areas of focus is auditability of machine learning, right? And it has fundamentally 3 areas that the way I look at it. One is it's all about trusting the predictions that are coming, right? So we can put it as, for example, one is bias, another one is explainability, and the other one could be drift. So drift in data can impact your accuracy of your predictions. And if there is a bias during training, right, that would have a serious impact in your predictions and the credibility of your system altogether. So when we are talking about synthetic data, right, in many cases, it can potentially lead to bias issues and drift issues because you may not be taking care of all the different dependencies and parameters in that ecosystem. You tend to focus on one element and then you expand the data set depending on that element, for instance, right? It can lead to bias and drift elements to a large extent. So I would also like to link this to what Sai Dheeraj mentioned, right? So there comes the importance of domain, the domain knowledge, right? So it's extremely important to link these two to avoid credibility issues in your systems, be it accuracy driven by drift or bias.
Yeah, thank you. That's a useful insight. That actually makes sense. So to answer that question in one sentence, Bignash, the thing that has to be done is make sure that you have enough domain knowledge before you start synthesizing data, and when you do it, please do it carefully. Okay, good. Thanks. So now we have a couple of more questions, and I need, ideally, if Professor Bhattacharya had been here, the question would have been best for him. So the question here is, what is the readiness of AI ML to do automatic translation in real time? If X person speaks in one language to another person Y, and Y is able to listen it in another language. So who in the panel wants to take that?
No, just a comment. Maybe I wanted to ask this question to Professor Bhattacharya, that can the network protocol be auto-designed by the NLP techniques? So, yeah, so I guess the decoding the language is a complex task. I do not have an answer, but I thought I will make this remark for if anybody else would like to take that.
And possibly, if Professor Bhattacharya has access to questions, if he could probably key in a few sentences that might be helpful for everybody in the audience. So Professor Bhattacharya, if you can hear us, and if you can key in a few words, that'd be helpful. And I'll move on to the next question, where Abhimanyu asks us, brain-computer interface is expected to be one of the upcoming enabling technologies for 6G. Can any of the panelists comment on it and its probable application and how security aspect would be handled? So Vinod, you'd want to take that, or Dheeraj? So Vinod, yeah, I see you move towards the camera. Please go ahead. Take that question, please. Vinod. Are you reading it? Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Please go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I'm not the right person to comment on it. I would rather pass it to Dheeraj, or would you?
No, not really.
Oh,
Completely new area. Yeah.
So, all right.
Elon Musk should be brought on the panel to answer it.
Right. So just a couple of words from my side, Abhimanyu. So what's going to happen here is, when you talk about brain-computer interface, I would not worry so much about the security as about the privacy. What's happening here is, the moment you're able to mine or get into the mind of a person, getting into the mind of the person is something that people hold really close to themselves. So even the mind or what you're thinking is no longer private, then you're in trouble. So I don't know so much about the security, but privacy is certainly going to be impacted. And good to see you, Prakash, because your time has come. You might have been saving something important for the last. So you might be wondering why the other chair has not been speaking, because he is the one who's going to close this discussion. And before he closes it, he's going to tell us something about the fact that AI ML has generated a lot of interest, not just in this session, but all the other sessions that have been happening. So Prakash, could you please say a few words about how AI ML has been a very, very popular topic in other sessions, and what your take is on that, and then close the session. Thank you so much, Prakash.
Thank you, Professor Brajesh. AML seems to be extremely hot, and even though the other panel topics were something very different, everybody was, almost in every session, I think you didn't spend more than 10 minutes without AML getting mentioned. So it's especially in the context, AML initially got started saying 6G, future networks, whatever else many people added, didn't add, AML is almost a mandatory element in all the projections of. And not only 6G, including even beyond 5G. Just 5G is already, let's say, standards are made, it's already here. But beyond 5G, all discussions is AI/ML based, and a lot of talk about radio management using AI/ML. Now, operators like Reliance Jio and Turkcell, when an operator starts talking about something, that means there is it is in deployment or very close to deployment, and they expect it to solve their problem or make money out of one of these two things. They both mentioned that the complexity of the networks and the network configurations and how they expect to use AI/ML or expect AI/ML to solve their problems. And in this context, I also want to mention that one of the major innovations Reliance Jio has done is in large-scale network deployment is the automation of the services. Not many people know it, but their network operations has been extremely automated, and that's how they could deploy such large networks in such small time frames. And the other one of the topics when this came about, multiple people also mentioned that there's this lack of data. If you want to do AI/ML, the primary thing you need is data on which models could be built. And for research, a lot of university delegates were asking, where is the data? How do we build models? Okay. Now I'll come back to, in fact, Professor Hari asked, can we start collaborating industry? There's an offer from the chair of Professor Hari from IISc saying, why don't we collaborate? Why don't we, start exchanging data and models, and we can start contributing. Then there was also talks when what do we use? What are the techniques? And they mentioned supervised, unsupervised, reinforcement learning. All these aspects techniques were talked about how we could probably use. Turkcell wanted to say federated learning. And already, as mentioned by both the panelists here, Saidi, Raj, and Subhash, that ML in Phi and ML, normally ML was always application layer, but now they're talking about Phi and in radio. Okay. Now another couple of points I wanted to add is that data availability is something that all the people have to start looking at in a serious manner. Maybe we need to have open data national level mission. That is it. You can't allow only a few big players control all the data. Everybody else just contributing to the data. Just whether it is people talk in context of privacy and users, but I think even network traffic and all the other aspects is something that we need to do. And how can anonymized data be available for R&D? Probably we need regulation for it to be pulled out of operators and all the Googles and Facebooks. That is something we have to do, so that the gap between monopolies and other companies, we have to bridge. We just have to grow big and all the data goes into you and nothing comes out. What do all the other companies and R&D people do? That is something we have talked about. Then another thought of whatever we have is that the AI/ML gets mentioned so much. Is it a tool? Is it a way of thinking, or is it a bubble? Somewhere in between this, we'll have to benchmark and see where is it? Where do we put our space? Another thing that we also have to see is that between theory and practice, we need to see is there a gap? An example is auction. There's good theory, auctions work well, but the spectrum auctions that happened in India, it didn't actually yield good results for the whole ecosystem. Similarly, when you start doing AI/ML, it's a theory is built, they start operationalizing it. Will it result in good, useful output for the society? That is something that we need to start looking at. Okay. And our speakers, they've already talked about it, how we can use for operationalization models, how can we use for wireless communications, and the aspect of it trickling down to Phi and coming up. Okay, I think a lot of these looks like there is certain amount of traction from theory to practice to maybe monetization, but a lot of work needs to be done is something I think everybody agrees upon. But there is immense amount of excitement and interest. That is something we can tell for sure. Thank you, Professor Rajesh.
Yeah, thank you so much, Prakash. So thank you for, and this is something that we must realize. There's a lot of interest in AI/ML. There's a lot of potential in AI/ML, but one has to be careful. So TSTSI will reach out to all of you. There are 5 areas that have been identified as possible areas where India can contribute. And one of them is haptics. There's a question on why do we talk about audio and video. So to Sandeep, I'd like to say that haptics is an area that we have identified. And one of the thrust areas for us is how is haptics going to be integrated into the communications scenario. So, Bindu, I think we've run out of time. Any closing words before we end the panel?
Thank you very much, Professor Lal. You've run the session so well. We are almost on time, just 2 minutes late. And why don't you just go ahead and list out the 5 areas that you wanted to talk about at the end. We could just steal another 2-3 minutes before we end the session.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. So the first area is AI ML and use of AI ML in quality of experience, because people are moving away from quality of service and gravitating towards quality of experience. What is the role that AI ML can play? Because at the end of the day, communication networks are about experience. The second is newer modalities. 3D and haptics are 2 new modalities, and we are looking at AI ML playing a role in integrating these into the overall communication infrastructure and ecosystem. The third area is a description-based encoding of video, where once you have a representation which is descriptive, it can help you not just in encoding, it can also help you in retrieval. So, one solution that solves all your problems related to handling that kind of data. Ditto for video, that's the 4th area. And the final area is the convergence of compute and communication, something that unfortunately we could not spend enough time on. So starting with MEC, we are trying to look at how AI and ML can play a role in a stronger convergence of communication and compute as areas. So these are the 5 areas, Bindu, and I know TSTSI will reach out to a larger audience about all of these 5 areas at some stage in time, but I thought I'd give people a heads up. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Professor Lal, and the speakers in this session for also sharing what lies ahead and where TSTSI would like to work in this very vast area. Thank you, delegates, for being with us in this session. As we come to the end of this session, we would like to invite you to the next session of our conference today, which starts at another 20 minutes from now on rural and remote data connectivity. We will be talking about global case studies. We have folks from Brazil, from the UK, Malaysia, and of course India, talking about rural and remote data connectivity, which is a very important aspect with respect to bridging the digital divide. Do join us in the next session. The link to the session has been placed in the chat box. Please exit this session and copy this link that is given in the chat box and exit this session and then join the next session. Looking forward to seeing you in our next session. Bye bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye bye.
Bye.
Thank you, TSTSI.
Bye.